My name is Samantha Rose Mitchell. I'm 34 years old, and exactly 11 minutes after my husband told me I'd get nothing in our divorce, I received a text message that would change everything. The message was from my attorney. Emergency hearing moved up. Judge wants to see us tomorrow at 9 a.m. Bring everything. My hands were shaking as I read those words, sitting alone in the parking lot of the country club where David had just humiliated me in front of his entire family. At precisely 6:47 p.m. on that Tuesday evening, he'd looked me dead in the eye and said, "You signed a prenup, Samantha. You'll walk away with nothing. Not a single dollar of what I built." What David didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I had spent the last 8 months meticulously documenting every lie, every hidden account, every fraudulent transfer. The prenup he was so confident about? I had proof it was signed under duress, with clauses that would never hold up in court. But more importantly, I had discovered something that would flip his entire world upside down. The company he claimed to have built alone, the $12 million tech firm he paraded around like his personal trophy, wasn't actually his at all. Not legally. Not technically. And tomorrow, a judge was going to hear exactly why. Before we go any further, David had announced at dinner that night, his voice carrying across the private dining room, "I want everyone to know that Samantha and I are getting divorced. She's decided she wants out of this marriage, so that's what she'll get, out. Nothing more." His mother had actually smiled. His brother had raised his wine glass in a mock toast. His business partner, Derek, had smirked from across the table. 53 people witnessed that moment. I counted every single one of them. That's when I knew I'd made the right choice 6 months earlier when I'd hired Carolyn Zhang, the most ruthless divorce attorney in the state, known for taking apart prenuptial agreements like a surgeon removing tumors. Before I explain what happened in that courtroom, let me know where you're viewing from and hit subscribe if you've ever been underestimated by someone who thought they held all the power. To really understand how I ended up in that parking lot, hands trembling with rage and something close to vindication, you'd have to go back 7 years to when I first met David Mitchell. I was 27, working as a software project manager at a mid-sized tech company in Austin, Texas. He was 35, charming in that practiced way that successful men often are, and he'd just launched his second startup after his first one had been acquired for a modest sum. We met at an industry conference where I was presenting on agile methodology implementation. He approached me after my panel, complimenting my insights, asking intelligent questions about scalability challenges. Within 3 weeks, we were dating seriously. Within 6 months, he proposed with a ring that cost more than my annual salary. I should have paid more attention to how quickly everything moved, how he seemed to be rushing toward something. The first red flag came during our engagement when he casually mentioned I should sign some standard paperwork before the wedding. "Just protecting what I built before we met," he'd said smoothly, sliding a thick document across the table at his attorney's office. "You understand, right? Business is business." I was young, in love, and frankly intimidated by the entire process. His lawyer, a man named Gerald Hutchins who chain-smoked cigars and spoke in condescending tones, assured me it was completely routine for executives. I signed it. I signed away my rights to anything David owned before our marriage, anything he would acquire during our marriage, and even my right to spousal support if the marriage lasted less than 10 years. Looking back now, I realize how thoroughly he'd orchestrated that moment. The meeting was scheduled for 4 p.m. on a Friday afternoon when I was exhausted from a brutal work week. The document was 47 pages of dense legal language. Gerald gave me exactly 20 minutes to review it before saying, "We need this filed today if you want to make your wedding date." I had voiced one concern: what about intellectual property I might develop? Projects I might contribute to? David had laughed, actually laughed, and said, "Honey, you're a project manager. I'm the one who builds things. Don't worry about it." Even Gerald had chuckled at that. I should have walked out right then. But I didn't. I signed. The wedding was beautiful. Exactly 220 guests at a vineyard in Napa Valley that cost David's parents $180,000. His mother, Patricia, made sure everyone knew that price tag. She also made sure to tell me, repeatedly, how lucky I was to be marrying into their family. The Mitchells had money, old Texas oil money that David had parlayed into new tech money. They saw me as the project manager who'd somehow landed above her station. For the first 2 years of marriage, things seemed relatively normal, or what passed for normal in David's world. I continued working at my job while he built his new company, Phoenix Tech Solutions. He'd wake up at 5 a.m., spend 14 hours at the office, come home, and immediately open his laptop for another 3 hours of work. I supported him the way I thought good wives were supposed to, managing our household, organizing his schedule, hosting dinners for potential investors. What I didn't realize at the time was how much of Phoenix's actual foundation I was building. David would come home with technical problems, architectural challenges his developers couldn't solve. "What do you think about this integration issue?" he'd ask, spreading printouts across our kitchen table at 10 p.m. I'd spend hours mapping out solutions, drawing flowcharts, writing detailed specifications that his team could actually implement. "You're really good at this," he'd say, kissing my forehead. My secret weapon. It felt like partnership. It felt like we were building something together. It wasn't until much later that I realized he was taking my detailed solutions, presenting them as his own insights, and never once crediting my contributions to his team or his investors. The 3rd year of our marriage was when David's business partner, Derek Chen, came into the picture. Derek was a venture capitalist with connections throughout Silicon Valley and enough startup capital to take Phoenix from a struggling operation to a legitimate player. At a dinner where they formalized their partnership, Derek had asked directly, "How much of this architecture came from your wife?" "David talks about your strategy sessions." David had gone very still, his smile freezing in place. "Samantha helps me think through problems sometimes, but she's not involved in the actual business. That's all me and my development team." Derek had glanced at me curiously, but I just smiled and changed the subject, not wanting to embarrass David in front of his new partner. That was my mistake. One of many. My best friend, Rachel Torres, saw what was happening long before I did. Rachel and I had met in college, and she'd built her own successful marketing agency from nothing. Over coffee one Saturday morning, about 4 years into my marriage, she'd said bluntly, "He's using you, Sam. All those late-night problem-solving sessions? That's not marriage support. That's free consulting work that he's monetizing." "He's my husband," I'd protested. "That's what partners do. They help each other." Rachel had stirred her latte slowly, choosing her words carefully. "Does he help you with anything? Does he support your career the way you support his? Or is it a one-way street that only flows toward David Mitchell's success?" I couldn't answer that question honestly without admitting she was right. David had never attended a single event related to my career. When I'd been promoted to senior project manager, he'd said, "That's nice," and immediately launched into a story about landing a major client. When I'd presented at a national conference, he'd been too busy to attend. Our entire relationship had become about serving his ambitions while mine quietly withered. The breaking point started building in our 5th year of marriage. Phoenix Tech Solutions landed a contract with a Fortune 500 company worth $8.5 million over 3 years. It was transformational for the business, and David celebrated by buying himself a Tesla Model S and taking Derek on a trip to Monaco. He bought me a necklace that I later discovered cost $300 on Amazon. At the celebration dinner his parents threw, another extravagant affair at their country club, his father, Robert, had stood up to give a toast. "To my son David, who had the vision and brilliance to build something remarkable from nothing. A true Mitchell through and through." Everyone applauded. David beamed. I sat there feeling invisible, remembering the 89 nights I'd stayed up past midnight helping him solve the exact technical challenges that had won them that contract. That night, driving home in David's new Tesla, I'd said quietly, "I helped with the architecture that won that contract. The integration framework was my design." He'd glanced over at me, his expression hardening. You drew some flowcharts, Samantha. That's not the same as building a company. Don't confuse supporting your husband with actually doing the work. Something inside me cracked in that moment. Not loudly, not dramatically, but fundamentally. It was the sound of illusions shattering, of finally seeing clearly what Rachel had been trying to show me for years. I wasn't David's partner. I was his unpaid consultant, his emotional support system, his convenient wife who made him look good at social functions while he took credit for everything we'd built together. I started keeping records the next day. Every technical document I created for him, every late-night problem-solving session, every email where I provided solutions that he implemented without attribution. I created a private folder on my laptop labeled Household Management that actually contained screenshots, time-stamped photos of whiteboards covered in my handwriting, and detailed logs of every contribution I'd made to Phoenix. David never noticed. He was too busy enjoying his success, too confident in the prenup that he thought protected him from any consequences. In our 6th year of marriage, Phoenix Tech Solutions was valued at $12 million during a funding round. David started talking about the company going public, about building generational wealth for the Mitchell family. "What about me?" I'd asked during one of these conversations. "What about our family?" He'd looked genuinely confused by the question. "You are part of the Mitchell family, Samantha. But Phoenix is mine. I built it before we got married. The prenup is clear about that." "You started it before we got married," I'd corrected. "But the company you have now, the architecture, the systems, the processes, we built those together." David had actually laughed at that. "Sweetheart, you're a project manager. A good one, sure, but let's not pretend you're a tech founder. This is my company. Always has been, always will be." That conversation happened exactly 11 months before I filed for divorce. It was the moment I decided I was done being invisible, done being used, done pretending that my contributions didn't matter. I reached out to Rachel, who immediately connected me with Carolyn Zhang. Carolyn's first words to me were, "Tell me everything, and I mean everything. Every email, every document, every witness who can verify your contributions." For the next 8 months, I methodically built my case while David remained completely oblivious. I had coffee with Derek, David's business partner, and casually asked about the early days of Phoenix. Derek had no idea I was gathering evidence when he said, "Honestly, David's technical vision was pretty limited back then. Someone was clearly helping him translate business needs into actual technical specifications. The architecture documents from those early years are way too sophisticated to have come from David alone." I contacted 3 of Phoenix's early employees who had left the company. All 3 confirmed in writing that they'd frequently received technical specifications and problem solutions from David's wife during those crucial first years. One of them, a developer named Amanda Liu, even had emails I'd sent directly to the development team when David was traveling and needed urgent architectural decisions made. I documented everything. The 156 times I'd provided technical solutions that were implemented in Phoenix's core systems, the $4.2 million contract that was won using my integration framework, the countless investor presentations that featured architectures I designed. Every contribution, every hour, every piece of intellectual property I'd created that David had claimed as his own. Carolyn reviewed everything with the precision of a surgeon examining test results. "This prenup has problems," she said finally. "You signed it under pressure, with inadequate time to review, and without independent legal counsel. But more importantly, if we can prove that Phoenix wasn't solely David's creation, that you were effectively an unbilled co-author of the company's core intellectual property, the prenup becomes irrelevant." "Can we prove that?" I'd asked, my heart racing. Carolyn had smiled, and it wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of someone who'd found exactly what she was looking for. "Samantha, with what you've given me, we can do more than prove it. We can argue that David committed fraud by claiming sole ownership of jointly created intellectual property. And in Texas, that changes everything." The final piece fell into place 6 weeks before I filed for divorce. I'd been going through some old backup drives, looking for more documentation, when I found something I'd completely forgotten about. In the first year of Phoenix's existence, when David was struggling to articulate his vision to potential investors, I'd written a comprehensive business plan and technical specification document. It was 73 pages long, and it laid out the exact roadmap that Phoenix had followed to become a $12 million company. The document was dated, had my digital signature embedded in the metadata, and contained architectural concepts that wouldn't appear in Phoenix's actual products until 2 years later. It was proof, undeniable proof, that I hadn't just supported David's vision. I'd been the architect of it. Carolyn's reaction when I showed her was quietly triumphant. "This is it. This is what we need. With this document and your other evidence, we're not just fighting for a share of marital assets. We're establishing that you're effectively a co-founder who was fraudulently excluded from ownership." I filed for divorce on a Monday morning, exactly 7 years and 3 months after our wedding. David was served papers at his office, in front of his entire executive team. According to Amanda, who still had friends at Phoenix, his face went completely white before turning bright red with rage. He called me 27 times that afternoon. I didn't answer. He sent 14 text messages, escalating from confusion to anger to threats. "This is insane. You signed a prenup. My lawyers will destroy you. You'll end up with nothing." That's when I finally responded with a single text, "We'll see what the judge says about that." For the next 3 months, David's legal team operated under the assumption that this would be a simple prenuptial enforcement case. They filed motions to dismiss my claims, arguing that the prenup was clear and binding. Gerald Hutchins, the same lawyer who'd rushed me through signing the original document, actually laughed during one preliminary hearing when Carolyn mentioned my alleged contributions to Phoenix Tech Solutions. David became increasingly aggressive as the divorce proceedings continued. He cut off my access to our joint credit cards, closed our shared bank accounts, and even had the locks changed on our house while I was at work. His attorney argued that since I'd abandoned the marital home by staying with Rachel, I'd forfeited any property rights. Every move was designed to intimidate me, to make me feel powerless, to force me to accept whatever scraps he was willing to offer. When David saw the extent of documentation I had, when he realized I'd kept copies of everything, he tried a different approach. He showed up at Rachel's house unannounced, looking haggard and desperate. "We can settle this, Samantha. I'll give you the house, $1 million, and you walk away. This doesn't have to get ugly. $1 million. Out of a $12 million company that I'd helped build. See you in court, David," I'd said, and closed the door in his face. The settlement offers increased after that. First $2 million, then $3.5 million, then $5 million and the house and a guaranteed consulting contract worth $500,000 over 5 years. Each offer came with increasingly desperate timelines. Offer expires in 48 hours. Take it or face complete financial ruin in court. Carolyn and I rejected every single one. 3 days before our scheduled court date, David made one final attempt at intimidation. He organized a family dinner at his parents' estate, the same location where we'd celebrated his Phoenix successes countless times before. When I arrived, I found not just his parents and brother, but also Derek, several Phoenix board members, and even some of David's old college friends. It was an intervention designed for maximum pressure. David stood at the head of the table, looking every bit the confident CEO. "Samantha," he'd begun, "I've gathered everyone here who cares about both of us to help resolve this situation before it destroys everything we've built. I'm prepared to offer you one final settlement. $6 million, the house, and a seat on Phoenix's advisory board. All you have to do is sign an agreement tonight." Gerald Hutchins was there with paperwork already prepared. Patricia was dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. Derek looked uncomfortable. This wasn't a good-faith negotiation. This was theater, designed to pressure me in front of witnesses. I stood up slowly, making eye contact with each person in that room. For 7 years, I have been the uncredited co-architect of Phoenix Tech Solutions, I said, my voice steady. I have documentation proving that I created core technical specifications, designed integration frameworks that are currently in use, and solved critical architectural problems that David claimed credit for. I have emails, time-stamped documents, and witness testimony from former Phoenix employees confirming my contributions. David's confident expression began to falter. I have a 73-page business plan and technical specification document, dated before Phoenix was even formally incorporated, that outlines the exact roadmap the company followed to its current $12 million valuation. That document has my digital signature in its metadata. Gerald Hutchins had gone very pale. The prenup that David is hiding behind was signed under duress. But it's irrelevant because Phoenix isn't solely David's creation. It's a company built on intellectual property that we created together, that he fraudulently claimed as his sole creation. I placed my phone on the table. This dinner is being recorded. Every word. If anyone tries to claim in court that I was offered a fair settlement and unreasonably refused it, I'll have proof of what this actually was, a coercive attempt to force me into accepting a fraction of what I'm legally entitled to. The room had gone completely silent. See you in court, David. All of you. David called me 41 times that night. I blocked his number at 2:37 a.m. The hearing began at 9 a.m. sharp in Judge Patricia Morrison's courtroom. David looked confident in his $5,000 Tom Ford suit, whispering to Gerald with the ease of someone who thought he'd already won. Gerald's opening statement was predictably dismissive about the prenup being valid and enforceable. Carolyn's opening was pointed. We will show that the Phoenix Tech Solutions that exists today bears almost no resemblance to the struggling startup that existed before this marriage. We will prove that Samantha Mitchell was the primary architect of Phoenix's technical foundation. Our first witness was Amanda Liu. I received technical specifications directly from Mrs. Mitchell on multiple occasions. Her specifications were always clear, technically sound, and more detailed than anything Mr. Mitchell had provided. Several of us on the development team used to joke that we should have been reporting to her instead. David's face turned red. Next was Derek Chen, David's own business partner. Under oath, he testified, in my initial due diligence, I had concerns about David's technical knowledge. Those concerns resolved after conversations where David presented solutions that seemed beyond his usual depth. He mentioned working with his wife. Based on those conversations and the technical documents I reviewed, yes, I believed Samantha Mitchell made substantial technical contributions to Phoenix. Carolyn then presented the 73-page business plan, showing how specifications I'd written matched, almost word for word, specifications later presented to investors as David's original work. I testified calmly about the countless nights I'd spent translating David's vague ideas into actual technical specifications, solving integration problems his developers couldn't crack, designing the architecture that made Phoenix's scaling possible. Our expert witness, Dr. Sarah Chen, delivered the final blow. The architectural frameworks attributed to Mr. Mitchell show sophistication inconsistent with his documented technical background. However, they're entirely consistent with someone trained in enterprise systems implementation, like Mrs. Mitchell. After 3 days, Judge Morrison called both legal teams to chambers and told them she was prepared to rule that the prenup was void due to fraud. David apparently lost his composure, shouting, "She's a project manager. She didn't build anything." Settlement negotiations followed, but when David's team offered $9 million, the house, and a public statement, I said no. I want the ruling. The next morning, Judge Morrison read her decision. I find that Samantha Mitchell has demonstrated, by clear and convincing evidence, that she made substantial intellectual property contributions to Phoenix Tech Solutions. Furthermore, I find that David Mitchell knowingly and fraudulently claimed sole authorship of work collaboratively created or primarily created by his wife. The prenuptial agreement is void. David closed his eyes, jaw clenched. As for Phoenix Tech Solutions, I am awarding Mrs. Mitchell 60% ownership of Phoenix Tech Solutions, valued at $12 million. Additionally, I am awarding Mrs. Mitchell her legal fees in the amount of $287,000, plus damages for fraudulent misrepresentation in the amount of $500,000. The courtroom erupted. I walked out with my head high. The aftermath was chaotic. David tried every angle: anger, bargaining, desperation. I sold 40% of my stake to Derek and other investors for $7.2 million cash, maintaining 20% ownership. I negotiated a board seat and insisted on restructuring Phoenix's leadership with a new COO I approved. 1 year later, I'm financially independent. My remaining stake is worth $3.2 million. The company is stronger than ever. David told me I'd get nothing in the divorce. He was wrong. I got everything that mattered: my dignity, my recognition, my freedom. Have you ever had to fight for recognition? Share your story in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe.